Hi, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and we are working on the December blocks for the Fat Quarter Shop Piece and Quilt Sampler Quilt Along. It's a lot of words there. Anyway, the quilt is located inside this book called Celebrate with Quilts by Lissa Alexander and Susan Aki. And Fat Quarter Shop also sold a foundation paper piece notion set for the blocks in this quilt. So I am showing how to use those papers. I'm not really showing how to put the blocks together, just which papers to use, because it doesn't tell you anywhere which papers to use, and how to use the papers. The papers are by It's So Emma. It's their half square triangle rolls and their square and a squares, flying geese. There's a ton of them out there, but those are basically the three we're working with on this quilt. So this month, actually this is the quilt that we're working on the front here. If you're interested in the book, you don't have to paper piece any quilt in this book. There are several quilts in here, and what they do is they have all their blocks spelled out for 4 different sizes and how to make each block, and then the quilts tell you which blocks to use and how big to use them, and that's how you put together these quilts. So it's a really good book. I would recommend it, and like I said, you don't have to paper piece anything. But if you bought the paper pieces, that's what we're working on. Anyway, this month we have 3 blocks. We have the 9-inch album star block. Let's see, that is right here. And then we have the 12-inch building blocks right here. That's my blue one. And the 12-inch union square. And that's this one. So this block, and this block are what we're working on this month. So this block doesn't have any paper piecing in it. I do show it as I set it up, but that's it. But I do go through the paper piecing for these two and which papers to use. So there you go. That's a mouthful. That's what I'm doing. Next month, all we have left to do is the half square triangle border that's around here. So we'll go through that next month, and then the quilt's going to be put together. Just needs some borders, which I've got to decide what to put on as borders. Anyway, I've got all my rows put together. This in the quilt pattern is actually the bottom row, but it really doesn't matter which way you orient your quilt. But I do have the center put together. Anyway, hit the subscribe button, notification bell if you want to see how this turns out in the end. Go through the last month and do the half square triangles and do all the other fun stuff we got here. All right, the first December block we're working on is Album Star. This is what it's going to look like. We are doing the 9-inch version. At the beginning of this, in May, we did a 12-inch version. This is going to be 9-inch with a border around it. So this is actually not much paper piecing. The center of this is going to be one of these square in a squares, and we're going to get the 3-inch foundation paper piece by It's So Emma, and that's if you get the paper piecing kit from Fat Quarter Shop for this quilt. The rest of this I'm going to have green corners, and then this is for my hourglass blocks that are in here. Those are the 3 colors I'm going to use for my hourglass blocks. So let's put my pieces aside. I've already cut those. For the 3-inch square and a square, we only need 1 for the center. I'm going to grab 1 paper. The instructions on the inside, are right on the inside of the pamphlet here, tell you to cut 2 squares, and we're going to cut them on the diagonal to get 4 triangles. So I've got my 2 squares here, and I want to cut them on the diagonal to be ready to put this together. All right, so these are the triangles for the outside. So I have 4 of them now. It does tell you how big a square to cut. You can do that. I just pull out my fabric, take my paper, and I cut around it. Make sure I have enough fabric around it. And there we go. That's for the number 1 in the center. To get started with the paper piecing, I want to have the back of my fabric against the back of my paper. I'm going to center my paper on here. I'm going to pin the two together right here in the middle. So once I have it pinned, I'm now going to trim for number 2, but I'm also going to trim for number 3 because it's on the opposite side of 2. And then I can put both pieces on while I'm over at my machine. All right, I'm trimmed up for my 2 pieces here. So I can take 2 of my triangles and I'm just going to line the corner of my triangle up with this. This triangle is plenty big. And I'm going to sew on this line, actually this line between 2, well, I'm working on 3. So 3, lock stitch at this point and sew and lock stitch at that point. And I'm going to repeat with this triangle over here for 2, lock stitching at both ends. There we go. There's our 3-inch, and it's finished 3.5 inches, square and a square. Foundation paper piece by It's So Emma that came in the paper piecing kit that Fat Quarter Shop sold for this quilt, and that's what I'm demonstrating during this video series for this quilt. So the instructions in here tell you how big of a white piece to cut, or your background, your center, and then you need 2 squares cut on the diagonal for your triangles, and it tells you how big to cut that also. It also tells you how to put these together, just like I showed you. So there we go. There's our center piece. Now that all our pieces are on, we can trim, and it says right here to trim on this line. So we want to trim on this solid line on the outside. There we go. There is our square and a square for the middle of our block. Now we can work on our hourglass, which we're going to make 4 of them. And these are going to point together. And it's going to go like this. So I will put them together like that and then iron towards the dark personally. And that way it will nest along this seam in the center and we'll have a nice hourglass unit to put in our block. There's my block laid out. My paper piece that I did is right here in the center. So it's a 9 patch that we're going to put together. And I'm going to iron according to the pattern. And here's my sashings that I cut. And these measurements are actually in the piece and quilt instructions. The quilt instructions, not the block instructions. That is our album block, first block for December. 9-inch on the inside, and then we put our border on the outside here to get to a 12.5-inch block. In the center, we used the 3-inch square and a square quilt block foundation paper pieces. If you bought the foundation paper piece kit from Fat Quarter Shop. And again, you don't need to paper piece any of these blocks to do this quilt. Our second block for December is a 12-inch building block. This is on page 20 of the book. This is what it's going to look like. There is no paper piecing involved in this. These are the pieces I have to put it together. And we need to put 9 patches together here and then 4 of these units here. And then we can assemble the block. So just wanted to come here and let you see the block, even though there is no paper piecing. There we go. Finished up our, it's called building blocks, our 12-inch building blocks block for December. Did not need any paper piecing in this. That turned out really pretty. Our last square, our last block for December, and basically our last block in the center of this quilt, is a 12-inch union square. This is what it's going to look like. We have half square triangles in here, and in this picture they're all the gray ones that you see. And we need 8 of them, and we're going to use the 2-inch half square triangle rolls from It's So Emma that came in the kit if you bought the kit from Fat Quarter Shop. So that is 2-inch finished. That's how these read. Sometimes I get confused by that, but they're 2-inch finished. It says that right here on the roll. And my will be in white and gray. And then the rest of these pieces, I have my center red piece. I have 4 of the red squares that go around here. And then these white squares are in the corners. And then these are for my hourglass units. So these are all cut, ready to go. We just need to get our half square triangles ready. So I need to, and you can cut it the size that it says in the instructions, or you can cut it like me, where I put it on the paper and cut around it. So I'm just going to cut a piece of fabric that's just a little bit bigger than my paper. And then that's in the gray. And now in the white, I'm just going to use this fabric that I just cut to cut a piece out here. There we go. That is for my half square triangles. And you can see that I have fabric all the way around my paper. So I need to put my 2 fabrics right sides together. Layer my paper on top. I'm going to throw a couple of pins right here in the center, just to hold this in place. I'm going to put my machine stitch length down on a lower stitch length to help perforate the paper when we're done. And now we can go over to my machine, or your machine, and sew on the dash lines, not solid lines, the dash lines in the direction of the arrows. Here's my paper piece sewn. Oh yeah, I've got teal thread in the bobbin, so you can see it there. So now what we want to do is cut on these solid lines. And I'm going to cut around my edges first. It's the longest solid line. There we go. There's my outer edges cut. Now we can just cut on these inner lines, solid. Cut our squares apart on the solid line, and then cut on the diagonal solid line, and then we'll end up with 2 of our half square triangles. There we go. So I'm going to finish these up and get them ironed out, and then we'll kind of lay our block out. There's my half square triangles. I have trimmed the tails off them. They're ready to go. I have 8 of them. Next we need to do the hourglass shape that's in here, and we're going to have 4 of these. So I'm just going to put them together in rows. I personally am going to iron towards the dark. That way it nests seams right here. There's my hourglass units trimmed up to size. So now we need to build the corners of this block, and this is what it's going to look like. I have 4 here, and I am personally going to iron towards the solid patches so that we can get a nested seam right here. There we go. There's my corners done. Here's the block laid out. We now have just a 9 patch to put together per the instructions in the pattern. There's my union square block, 12-inch. And that's the 3rd and final block for December and for the center of the quilt. This block, just to recap here, I did use the 2-inch finished half square triangles in the paper piece kit if you got that from Fat Quarter Shop. And I really like the colors of mine. I did follow the picture that they used. I'm using my So Colorful Fat Quarter bundles that I got in the last year. So I like the combination of my colors here. And there's my other 2 blocks for December. All right, so hopefully I have my quilt together at the beginning of the video and you saw it, because these are the last blocks for the center. Next month we're doing all the half square triangles. So I will meet you back then and see how that goes. I think there's something like 140. Yep, there's 140 half square triangles we have to make. I'm not even sure what size yet, but we'll figure that out. So if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and you'll get notified next month of the piece and quilt and the half square triangles. And you can follow along on all the other fun stuff we got going on here. And I hope you have a happy holiday, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.